Hello everyone. I'm going to walk you through project 1 for Info366. In this project we're going to set up our virtual machines, make sure we have MariaDB installed. We're going to take and also our database is configured. We're going to take some snapshots as we go along so we have our machines to spin up later on very easily, so we don't have to go through this work again. And that's pretty much it. And we'll try to use the MySQL client. We'll install MySQL Workbench. And we'll use MySQL command line to try to interact with our MariaDB server and get comfortable with using it and make sure we're comfortable with the Linux environment a little bit. So let's get started. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure you set up a Google Cloud account. And when you log into Google Cloud, and it won't charge you, right? So if this is your first time setting up a Google Cloud account, you're not going to have to pay for it until it's been over a year, or if you exhaust your $300 credit. I've been using my Google account, so I created a new one for Info365 and 366. I used my Drexel account to create a Google account, and I think my charges so far have been like $4. So if you do this right, it really doesn't cost anything. And like, I'm not actually paying that. It's just chipping away at my free $300 that I get from Google. But to create so you may already have an instance. If you took Info365, you probably already have one in your Google account. You can see that I do. I've got a couple instances here. The second one is a snapshot of the first one that I took earlier. So I'm going to create a new instance. So I'm going to assume that you've never done this before in case you took a different version of Info365. And I'm going to call this Info366. And I forgot we have to do underscores. Or no, I'm sorry, we have to do a hyphen. So it's going to be Info366. Since this is going to be my first machine. We're going to end up using a couple machines in this class because we're going to need a few different machines to try some different things. I'm going to do a micro. So there's a bunch of different options here. I'm choosing micro because it's the cheapest. It's all you need for this class. You don't need anything crazy. I'm going to leave mine set to Debian Linux 9 stretch. This is the default for your Google virtual machines. It'll work fine. Everything else here you can leave as the default. We don't need to turn any of this other stuff on. We don't need to open up any ports or anything like that. And you can see here, look at that, I've used less than $3 so far, and I've been using it for over a quarter. I had my other machine running the entire quarter and only used $4 or almost $3 that entire time. So it's pretty cheap to use Google if you end up paying for it. So that's it. So pretty simple. Really, all I have to do is give it a name. Everything else, make sure you change the machine type. And I'm going to create this virtual machine. And it's going to take a little bit of time, so you're going to see this little arrow over here spinning for a while until it's done. So I'm going to pause this until mine is done. All right, my machine is now running. So my next step is to start configuring this machine. So the first thing is I'm going to connect to it with the tool that's in the browser, right? So if I go over here to SSH, I can open a browser window, and it'll open up a window, and the little SSH client opens. I'll pause this while it's opening. So it automatically logs you in with your Google account. You can see I set up a Google account just using my Drexel email, so it's BCG28, same as my Drexel account. But I'm not logged in as root right now, and in order to do that, in order to connect as root, I have to set the root password. So we have to use the password command to do that. So I'm going to run sudo. By default, Google puts your user accounts in the sudoers group, so you can run things as root. So I'm going to use sudo and change the password for root. I'm going to give it a new password. So this step, very important at this step, you have to remember what you put in for your password. So I'm going to set mine. I highly recommend you document this somewhere where you're going to remember it because you're going to need to use this root password a lot. And also, every time we do something, we're going to have to log in, right? So it's really important to make sure you remember that password in case you need to do anything on your Linux machine. But it's not a good idea to run as root, so we're also going to create a user account. But for right now, I'm going to use the su command to switch to my root account. That way, I don't have to keep typing sudo every time I do something. Hopefully, you remember a lot of this from your Linux classes. So now that I'm logged in as root, by the way, I can tell I'm logged in as root because I have a pound sign at the end of the prompt. So the pound symbol means that I'm in as root. The dollar sign means that I'm just a regular user. And I'm going to create a user account. And we're going to use the user add command to do that. So I'm just going to create a user called student. And I'm going to set the password for student. Oops. Okay, so now I have a student account. So I've got my root account, I've got my student account. So I'm SSH'd into this machine with Google's client, which is great, but we're going to need to copy files up to our server. We might need to copy files down from our server. We're going to want to be able to interact with our server through SSH for a variety of reasons, including the client that we're going to use from Windows and things like that. Unless you're using a Mac, then you can use the Mac client. But in order to do that, we're going to have to make some quick changes here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the config file for SSH so I can connect to it from another computer. By default, Google doesn't let you do that unless you're using your Google account, which means you have to create a certificate and it gets complicated. We don't want to have to worry about any of that stuff. So we're going to edit our config file. So your config file is going to be in Etsy. I'll just show you where it is here. So under Etsy, one of these files is going to be SSHD, right? So if you look through this list here, it's in alphabetical order. Where is it? There it is, SSH. So I'm going to go into the SSH directory. Oops. I've got a couple different files here. I want to go into the SSHD config. We're going to use the VI command in order to edit that file. Oops, it's underscore, not dot. All right, there's a bunch of stuff in here. But what I want to change in here is number one, we want to change it so that it does a challenge response for authentication. And let me see if I can find it here. There we go. So right now, password authentication is set to no. I'm going to hit X twice to get rid of no. Hit I for insert. Type yes. Challenge response. I'm going to say yes. That way it'll prompt me for a password when I try to log in. And I think that's all we need. So just these two lines. Password authentication should be yes. And challenge response is also going to be yes. That way we can, it allows an interactive login. Use PAM is set to yes. That means it's going to use the Linux accounts. So I'm going to hit escape, which is going to get me out of insert mode. I'm going to hit the colon, W for write, Q for quit, exclamation point to exit right away without being asked. So I'm out. Next, I have to restart the SSH service for those settings to take effect. And I think it's going to be the service CTL, or I'm sorry, system CTL. Sorry, I was getting mixed up. So system CTL, let's check the status first. So status is of SSHD. Right now it's active running, right? So I'm going to restart it. So now it's restarted, that easy, right? So now I'm going to leave this up and I'm going to open my PowerShell. So I'm going to use PowerShell on my computer. Oops, I'm already disconnected. So if you have a Windows machine, you're going to want to use PowerShell. If you're on a Mac, instead of using PowerShell, you just use the console on Mac. All of this stuff will work natively in Mac, or it'll work in the PowerShell in Windows. The same commands, and they work pretty much the same way. So I'm going to SSH to my server, but in order to do that, I need to know the IP address to my machine. One thing I want to mention here about these IP addresses is that they are going to periodically change. So anytime you restart your machine, you quite possibly will get a new external IP address. And I've had other semesters where students go a couple weeks saying their machine doesn't work, and I go in to help them figure out why their machine's not working, they can't connect to it, and it's just because the external IP address changed. They didn't realize it. So always make sure you check that IP address. So I'm going to go back to the PowerShell. I'm going to use the SSH command. I'm going to put the username. So I'm going to log in as student. And then I'm going to paste, just use the right mouse click in Windows to paste it in, the IP address for my machine. I'm going to hit enter. It's going to ask me if I want to accept that certificate. I say yes. Put my password in. And I'm in. And I can use the SU command. And now I'm connected as root. So now that I'm connected as root to my machine, the next step is we're going to install MariaDB. right? So that's the next step. So to do that, we're going to yum install MariaDB. Oh, I forgot, we're on Debian. Yum obviously works in Red Hat, but in Debian we have to use apt-get. So we are going to try to get MariaDB. Oh, sorry. Install MariaDB. Unable to locate package. It might be MariaDB server. All right, so it's MariaDB-server, and it's going to ask me about a bunch of stuff here, right? So it's going to ask me if I want to install all of these packages that are prerequisites. So I'm going to say capital Y for yes, and it's going to try to install this stuff. It's going to take a minute, so we just got to wait. Okay, once it's done, you're going to get the prompt again. So now I can check to see if it's installed by typing MySQL -u root, see if it lets me log in, and I'm in. So I know it's installed and I know it's running. So the process is running. However, let me exit this. So we want to make sure that it's running as a background service. Right now it's just running as a process, right? So if I type PS, well, it's running in the system space. So, but in any event, it's running as a background process, right? I think top actually will probably show it. So what we want to do is make sure it's running as a background service in Linux. So to do that, we're going to do systemctl MariaDB. Oh, sorry, status MariaDB, and it says it's active running, which is good, but we want to make sure that it is enabled. So I'm going to type enable. Now this is a really important step. If you forget to do this, if you forget to enable MariaDB, and I'm going to show you here. Let me stop it, and then we'll check the status. All right, so now it's not running, and now I can start it, and we'll see that it's running. Right? Let's take a look. Now it's running. So if you forget to run this enable command, the first time you reboot your Linux machine, when it comes back up, it won't be running MySQL or the MariaDB service. It won't be running, which is obviously a problem, right? So you'll have to go in and run that command to start it every single time. But what I find is sometimes students after a while forget that they have to do that, and then they call me saying that their MariaDB server doesn't work anymore. And I'll go in and realize they just never enabled it. So don't let that happen to you. Make sure you enable the service so it starts every time you log in. So now that my MariaDB service is running, the next step is I want to set up our test database. So if you took Info 365, we used the test database called College Scorecard. It was just a list of colleges and all the attributes about colleges. I like to use it as a test database because it's pretty big, right? It's got a lot of data in it. So kind of, you can do a lot of interesting things with it to play around with the database. You can, construct lots of complicated queries with it. So we're going to use that again in this course. And if you didn't take this course previously, don't worry. I have a copy of that database, a backup copy that you can download. That's in Blackboard. It's in the assignment for Project 1. So you can download the backup copy and you can just restore it. And I'll show you how to do that now. So in order to do that, the first thing we need to do is we have to get out of our remote session. So I'm going to get back to the command prompt on my local machine. If you're on a Mac, same thing. You're going to exit out of your remote connection and get back to your machine. We're going to use the scp command to copy the file up to the server. So you're going to download that backup file for the database to your machine. And you're going to use the scp command, and that's secure copy, right? So it's going to basically uses SSH to copy the file up to the server. So I'm going to connect. So it's going to be student at, and then hopefully the IP address is still there. But the source of the file I have to put in here first. You always start with the source. So let me go find my file. So I put my file in a folder called PROJ1, right? So I'm going to copy the full path to this. So there's the path, and then I called it college scorecard. .sql, and then we are going to copy it to student at 3467.47.237 backslash, or forward slash rather. So it's a forward slash, not a backslash. And actually, I think that's all we need, because we're going to just drop it right into the root, right into our home directory. So let's see if that actually, yeah, I think that should work. Let's give that a try. Oh, we have to, it's a different suffix on there. Sorry, I forgot the colon there after the IP. So after the IP, it's colon forward slash. And then you put your password in. I'm using my student account. So let's see. Oh, you know what? There's a space. So take a look over here. There's a space between Google and Drive. If you have a space in your path, make sure you put quotes around it. So I'll do that with mine. All right, still doesn't like it. Did I spell it wrong? College scorecard.sql. Oh, whoops, it's college scorecard backup. Now it should work. Let's see. Oh, I don't have a home directory. So when we created our user account, it probably didn't create a home directory for our user, so we have to do that. So let's SSH back into our servers. Let's do a little troubleshooting here. So if you do ls home, there's a BCG28 directory, right? We have to make a directory called home student. Permission denied. Oh. Sudo make their home student. Oh, I have to use su, sorry. But I think I actually created that directory, so let's take a look. Nope. So we're going to do make dir home student. There's our student directory. We're going to change the ownership of student to student. Oh, sorry. /home/student. And I have it backwards. Sorry about this. There we go. So now the owner is student. So now if I exit from here, I'm going to exit again to get all the way back to my Windows prompt. Now when I run this SSH command, it should copy the file. Permission denied. All right, let's SSH back in. We're going to have to set the permissions on that folder. So I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to get back in as root, and then we're going to type chmod 777/home/student. That'll just let anybody read and write from that folder, which is what we want, or that directory. And now, hopefully this time it works, right? It's always a little bit of oh. Still permission denied. All right, let's take a look. All right, sorry, you have to put the full path to the file. So after the :/ it's home student college scorecard backup.sql. And there it is. So now it's copied, right? After all that. But now you know how to use the scp command to copy, right? So now I'm going to go back to PowerShell. So now now that I've got the file there, if I connect to my machine, so now I'm in, and if I show the contents of home student, there's my file. All right. By the way, I type cd and then tilde because that puts me in my home directory, which is student, because I'm logged in as student, right? So now I'm going to connect to MySQL using the root user account. And I do -p, so it'll prompt me for a password. Actually, I don't need .p yet. We don't have a password yet. Oops. Sometimes this does this. All right, so we have to do SU first. Sorry, I always forget that. We got to log in as root. All right, now if we type MySQL -u root, we should be connected. We have to create our database first. So we're going to call it college scorecard. So that creates our database. If we type show schemas, oops, I spelled it wrong. Sorry, I'm fat fingering it. There we go. There's my college scorecard database. Now I have to plug in that SQL script. So let's get back to the command line. This time I'm going to type MySQL -u root, and I'm going to tell it to use the college scorecard database. And then I use the less than to say use a file, and it's going to be college scorecard backup.sql, which I've already copied to the machine. I don't have to put the full path because I should already be in the directory for it to get it, but just so you guys don't have to see more errors, because I'm not entirely sure where MySQL is going to read it from, I'm going to put it in here anyway. And you could do the same if you like, or you could try it without it. But let's see what happens here. Oh, I spelled scorecard wrong. Sorry. It's an uppercase S for scorecard. All right, this is going to take a little time for this to run. There's a lot of stuff in that file. I think it's a 37 megabyte SQL dump file. So give this a few minutes. Mine already finished. That's interesting. That was pretty fast. So let me log in and take a look at it. Yeah, it's there, that's for sure. Let me see if there's some records. Yep, we've got records, so we're good. So that's how we recover our database. So one more thing we want to do while we're in the machine here, we're going to, let me exit from my database. There is a MySQL admin utility, which hopefully if you took 365 recently, you probably remember how to do this, but there is, in here, we're going to change the root password. So there should be, there we go, so right here, password, changes the old password to a new password, right? So we are going to set the password for MySQL using MySQL admin. This is going to set the password for the root account. So this is the command to put in your MySQL password. I'm going to make mine bang bang drx bang bang like this. See if that works. All right, so now MySQL password is wow, I don't know what that is. Hopefully it didn't make it this long string. I never had that happen before. But let's find out. So I'm going to restart. Still works. All right, so I'm good so far. There's another way we can manage our user accounts. We're going to learn more about user accounts next week. I'm going to get into more detail on this. But for right now, what I'm going to want you guys to do is number one, make sure that you can that you have your MySQL server set up, right? So at this point, if you can log into MySQL and just type show databases or show schema, either one, and take a screenshot of this. Is going to be your first deliverable. Take a screenshot. It should show the college scorecard. Then you're going to type use database, college scorecard. Oh, did I spell it wrong? Oh, sorry. It's just use college scorecard. Sorry, I had a little brain fart there. So use college scorecard. So you're in the college scorecard database, and then just do select ISTNM from school. Limit. We'll do limit 20 to 25. You could just do any 10 records, right? Or any 5 records would be fine. And it'll look something like that. And just, actually what you could do, just to make this easier for your screenshot, I'm going to put Brian Green, but you're going to type your own name. A student name. So that way, when you get your screenshot, it'll have your name and it will have a list of a bunch of colleges that are in your recovered database. So that's going to be for the first deliverable, is just show me a list of the colleges, make sure your name is in here somewhere, and also the name of the database as you're logged in with SSH, directly into your database. The next thing I want you to do, so this is a good time to pause the video if you want to get that prepared, but the next thing we're going to do is install MySQL Workbench. So MySQL Workbench is a free utility. You can download it from Oracle. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So let me just minimize this. So this is the web page for MySQL Workbench. You just go to mysql.com/products/workbench. Hopefully you can see that at the top. You can just Google search MySQL Workbench, and then you're going to click on download now. You might have to fill out a little form in order to get it. But once you download MySQL Workbench, the next step is you should be able to run MySQL Workbench. Let me show you what that looks like. So when you first open MySQL Workbench, it's going to look a little like this. And under MySQL connections here on the left-hand side, it looks like mine just crashed. Let me bring it back up. Well, while my MySQL Workbench is restarting, I'm going to show you another step here. We do have to make sure we create a user account in MySQL. So to do that, well, first, let me show you, let's see a list of our users. So I'm just going to do select, let me see, it's going to be select users from MySQL.user. All right, so I have one user account, root, right? And that's it. But I need to, I want to set the user account, the username, but I also have to make sure that that I set the, I talked about this in the lecture a little bit, but authentication is based on the username and the host name as well as the password, right? So let's add a new user that's going to be on the local host. Actually, this root account is on the local host, so I should be able to just alter it. So let's see if this works. So we're going to do alter user, or at least I think it's alter user. And it's going to be root. Oh, this is a grave, by the way. That's the little, that quotation mark is the little one on the above your tilde on the keyboard underneath the escape key. So root at, I'm just going to put % because that'll be everything, right? It's uh-oh, I think I just lost my connection. Oh, this happens sometimes. I lost my connection to my server. So let me get back in. I'm going to use SU to get back in as root. All right, alter user, and my user is going to be root at %. You know what? I think it is just a single quote. All right, let's see if that works. Oh, I think I have to do password. So that command should work, the alter user, but let's try this one. I didn't try it yet, but it's update mysql.user set password equals, and then in parentheses with password, whatever password you want to use. I'm using bang bang drx bang bang just because it's easy for me to remember. But let's see if that works. Let me come back over here and hit enter. Well, I think that worked. So that one worked. I don't know why alter user didn't work. Maybe I had a misspelling somewhere, but yours might work. It may have worked for you, which is great if it did. If not, this certainly works as well. So now if I exit and I try to come back in, oops, sorry, let me exit this. And let's go ahead and restart MySQL. So I'm going to do systemctl restart MariaDB. There we go, it's restarted. Now I put a -p on the end of this command, the MySQL command, to connect. Put my password in, and I'm connected. So now I have a password. So the next step is hopefully you're able to download MySQL Workbench. So let me open up MySQL Workbench on my machine. All right, so once it's open, you're going to click this little plus sign under MySQL Connections. And we're going to give this a name. I'm going to call mine info366A because this is my A database. For my connection method, I'm going to do standard TCP/IP over SSH. So that means we're going to connect with SSH first, and then it's going to connect with to MySQL once it creates an SSH tunnel. So this allows us to connect to the machine without opening up any MySQL ports from our server, which is, of course, not a good idea to open MySQL's ports. So let me come back over here and go into my engine. There's my IP address for my server. Let me go back to MySQL, paste that in. So you're going to have your IP address, port 22, which is the default. Student is going to be your username unless you use something else. And then I'm going to store my password in the vault. All right, so that's done. Then the MySQL hostname stays as 127.0.0.1 because we're tunneling through SSH. So once that SSH connection is established up here, then it's going to use the local host to access it. We're going to use root for the username. I'm going to put in my password for root, hit test connection on the bottom. I get a failure. Let's see what it says. And it says it cannot create an SSH connection. So let's see if we can figure out why here. That looks right to me. Let me use the student account. Let me put a password in here again. So once you have your MySQL Workbench installed and you configure your account, the last step that I'm going to want you to do is take a snapshot of your machine. Just make sure you know how to do this because at certain points in the course, we're going to want to take a snapshot of our machine in order to, take a snapshot in time so that we can either go back to that version or if we want to make duplicates of our machine, right? So we might want to make copies of it because we need a couple different MariaDB servers to do something, right? Or we just might want to make a copy to have another VM laying around to set up the service or something like that. So to do that, to create a snapshot, you're going to go over here to Snapshots. Then you're going to click on Create Snapshot. you have to give it a name. So I'm going to call mine info. Oops, has to be all lowercase. Info 366A, and then I'll put today's date. Actually, I'll put the date first. 2019. Oh, did I select the right? Hold on, I got to go back. Make sure I select the right one. Yeah, MariaDB. Sorry. So I'm going to select on that. My 365. That's not the one I want to make a snapshot of, though. Oh, there we go. Source disk. I have to set that to 366A. So info dash 366 2019 0620 dash A. So I'll hit create. It's going to take a while, but once it's done, I'll have my snapshot. So the last thing I want you to submit for this assignment is, first show me that your tables are created, right? That you imported that sample database. But then you're going to come over here and create your snapshot and just take a snapshot of your snapshot screen, right? So I can see that you know how to create a snapshot and that you have one. I want to make sure you have a snapshot of this machine after you install MariaDB. That way, with the tables, that way we can make copies of it to work on assignments throughout the rest of the term. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.